Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Now, if you're like many guys, you probably think that Tantra is some mystical woo-woo thing existing in a different realm that's inaccessible to you. It's only reserved for sex gods and goddesses, and it requires 12 hours of endurance like Sting to practice. But what if I were to tell you that Tantra has extremely practical benefits, such as the ability to control when you ejaculate, getting and staying harder more often, facilitating better, deeper, and more powerful orgasms for you and your partner. Oh, and Tantra, by the way, can also help you experience mind-blowing intimacy while dramatically expanding your realms of sexual pleasure, if you're into that kind of thing. So our guide today for our very first discussion on Tantra on the Great Man Within podcast is the majestic Krystal Tantric Yogi. Now, who is Krystal Tantric Yogi? So Krystal is a Tantra teacher who has a knack for making Tantra practical and approachable for the beginner. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring her on the show. While she also has this ability to mix in the deeper and more spiritual elements of the practice, which I know Brian and I are both really deeply interested in. Now, she's built an impressive following online as someone who never really considered herself an influencer or never set out to be an influencer. She's already had 125,000 subscribers subscribe to her YouTube channel. Her videos have been viewed over 16 million times. And some of her catchy episode titles are The Best Way to Help a Woman Orgasm, How a Yoga Practice Can Help Men in the Bedroom, Interesting Facts About the Penis, Sex Positions for Smaller Penises, and my personal favorite, Why My Pussy Didn't Like Being Vegan. And today, Krystal is here to give us an intro level discussion on the foundational elements of Tantra. So in today's episode, Krystal clears up the two major misconceptions about Tantra. She talks about the one thing that you're doing too much of that is draining your sexual life force. She talks about why porn is like fast food. Now, this is interesting because Brian and I have talked quite a bit on the show about how porn has many of those fast food elements, but Krystal brought in a totally different perspective that really blew the lid off of my understanding of porn. She talks about how porn fails to satiate your emotional and psychological appetites, which oftentimes gets lost in the shuffle of our porn behaviors, which is one of the reasons why we can walk away from our interactions with porn feeling maybe guilty, shameful, or unfulfilled on some level that we can't quite put our finger on. So that was powerful. She talks about why our sexual selves are often segregated or completely unaddressed from the rest of ourselves, resulting in a latent form of shame and a stunting of our full range of potential sexual pleasures that are available to us. She talks about why we as men need to stop looking at our dicks as just some carnal pleasure device and instead see it as our gateway to a much higher form of sexual expression and consciousness if we know how to use it. And then finally, at the end of the episode, Krystal talks to us about one very practical tantric practice that we can try right now to bring more blood flow to the penis, to last longer and control our ejaculation. So enjoy our first foray into the realm of Tantra with today's episode of Tantra 101, a man's intro guide featuring Krystal Tantric Yogi. Krystal, unbeknownst to Brian, for the last 6 months, I have been on an active search to bring the perfect person onto the show to talk to our men about an intro level conversation around the benefits of Tantra. And there are so many misconceptions around what Tantra is, but when I finally found your Instagram account, when I found your YouTube channel, which is super popular, and I started watching your videos, I noticed how deep your practice is and how practical you are in making this approachable at the most basic and beginner level. I'm like, you are the perfect person to bring on the show. So I just wanted to say, I'm so grateful that we found you and thank you for saying yes to being here welcome to the Great Man Within podcast.
Well, thank you for being here. That's such a high compliment. I feel like I don't even deserve it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you deserve it.
Well deserved. And maybe Dominic can tell us about why it took 6 months and the crap that he found in between, because apparently you do very much have earned this.
Like one of the things that you said is, Tantra in your mind. I mean, I'm interested to hear what you had to say, but before you were like, yeah, I thought that Tantra is only for sex gurus who can go for 12 hours, who are sitting in an ashram somewhere. And that to me is just kind of like, how does that have practical application into my life? And, many of the teachers and practitioners are so deep into their practice that they feel inaccessible, right? For the person who maybe is like, yeah, I just want to know how to have sex for more than 5 minutes, or, I want to learn how to please my partner in ways that like are different than the ways I've been pleasing her or him for the last 5 years. Right. So, to make it practical at the grounded level, and Krystal you speak at that level, which is why I was just like, you are the one.
I'm glad you bring that up. I think that's very true. Because even when I started working with my teacher, I was like, he was extremely knowledgeable, but I'm like, how does this relate to my life? How do I bridge the gap between, all these mantras and everything that he was teaching me to like what's going on in my life? And what I found, and I don't want to sound too judgmental, but I think sometimes, it's like kind of like when you go to church, because you said you grew up as a Catholic, you'll have people that know all these scriptures, but then when you go home, their marriage is kind of not all that great, or they're not super relatable. Like they do things ritualistically, and not saying that these are bad people, not at all. But sometimes when it comes to actually transforming your life, that's really the hardest thing. And that's the deepest work you do. So sometimes we get into the ritualistic aspect of doing these practices, but when it comes to actually how we apply them to our life and live them, sometimes that's the hardest thing for people, even those of us who are really deep in certain practices. So for me, I came into this I don't want to say innocently, but I'm a truth seeker. So I was searching for truth. And from where I come from is like kind of Christian Baptist background. And then through athletics, trying to heal injuries, ended up in Tantra. Like it was very kind of organic experience. And I just wanted to run again. Like that's all I wanted to do. And all this stuff kind of came up. So my background is always coming from that place, and so I'm like, well, what about my life? And so maybe that's why it comes across that way. And I think sometimes when people they forget about this is about living, sometimes we forget about that, I think.
Maybe you could give us just a really quick background of how you got there, because I've heard the word Tantra, I think since I watched American Pie. And the nerdy character was the guy doing Tantra, and all I knew was that he could go for hours, and that sounded awful. I was like, well, I actually want to finish, so hours sounds like terrible. So I never wanted to do that. And since then, like let's say in the last 3 years, I've met a few tantric workers, and I like what you're talking about, the practicality, because the reason I haven't gone down this path at all is because I'm like, okay, in theory, this sounds good, but in practice, what is really going to happen? Am I really going to like tell my girlfriend, hold on a second, let's do some breath work for 15 minutes before we really get into the sexual part of the game? And that just seemed a little bit ridiculous. So I would love to hear your path, how you got into this and what it's done for you in terms of the practical application of tantric work.
I was trying to be as practical as possible, but my path wasn't that practical. I mean, and you probably understand this, like your own journey, like you're going along and your life seems practical, and then it just kind of gets turned upside down and you're like, what the hell? And then it becomes impractical. Like when you start getting into like, I guess it's the hero's journey. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's like when you start walking down that path, like nothing is practical anymore. But so we'll start in Tennessee. So my family moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. My ex-husband, I had to get used to saying that, worked for Alcoa. So very manufacturing, very kind of blue collar place, but beautiful place. And that's where all the mountains and the trees. And so very, I would say God country is very different from New York. but like, I feel like God is in nature. And so when we moved there, being from Houston, Texas, was the first time I started hiking, and I was exposed to yoga and just a different lifestyle. But I started off as a runner. I have an athletic background, and I had kids back to back to back. And I was going to be a doctor, and that didn't happen. And my daughter got diagnosed with autism. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? And something just said run. And so I just went back to my background, I guess, to relieve stress and try to figure out what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do with my life? And so I just began to run, and I did marathons, half marathons, ran through mountains, and I got really fast. I never ran that much before, and I have a lot of talent, but I didn't go to a school that actually honed it very well. And so I was like, well, maybe I could go to the Olympics. Don't ask me why, but that's what my thought was. Lo and behold, I actually got invited to run with UT. Some Olympians were there and some professional athletes were there. And I got invited to run because I did yoga. I was a Black girl that did yoga. So there was an Olympian there named Hazel Clark, and she was very interested in the fact that I was a Black girl that did yoga, and I was around her age because I was like 29 or 30, just about to be 30. And her career was kind of ending. She was like, okay. She thought I was going to be a joke, but I came out there and ran with the girls, and I did really well. That was an interesting time. Long story short, I ended up getting injured because didn't have an Olympic background.
I would also be injured if I started running with Olympians. That's probably immediately.
But I did really well. I guess I was so determined, and I did have some talent, and they were really excited about me, but I didn't have the foundation. And so from that point on, I was like, I had this crazy dream, and it actually came really close to coming true. And so I was like, I don't want to stop. I got really excited because I thought maybe this was my purpose, and I would have this great story about this mom that went anyway. So I was doing everything trying to correct my hip injuries. I had SI joint dysfunction, and I had an imbalance in my hips. And I was going to physical therapists, and nothing was working. So I went back to yoga. I got serious about my yoga practice. And what happened as I started to practice yoga with the intention to heal my hips, I started having a lot of crazy dreams, but not crazy as just like floating in the space crazy. It was that kind of crazy, but also just orgasms would come up. And it wasn't like I was just super horny, but it was just like I would have dreams like of rainbow shooting out of my third eye or my crown chakra and stuff like that. And then I started to meet people, and we'd have long conversations, have these deep connections. And so I was like, what the hell is going on? And every time I tried to ask anybody, whether if they were in Kundalini yoga or, different gurus with different backgrounds, they would always shy away from the sexual part of my dreams when I was trying to understand. And so I just kept searching and asking. And again, my goal was to run again. That's all I wanted to do because I wanted to be an Olympian. This was going to be it for me. I didn't become a doctor, but I'm going to become an Olympian. So I was very adamant about trying to figure out what was going on. And since I had a kind of spiritual context because I had a yoga background now, I was like, well, maybe I need to dig deeper energetically, the sacral chakra, which is related to the pelvic region of the body. And I was like, well, maybe it's an energetic thing. And so I came across Yoni eggs, and I don't know if y'all guys know about what Yoni eggs are.
Yeah, go ahead and describe that to our audience.
Yeah, so vaginal eggs actually stem from the jade egg practice that started in China, ancient China. And they're used to strengthen a woman's pelvic floor, also to help strengthen her vaginal walls. And they also help the energetic aspect of the womb that help to heal. There's a whole spiritual building of the energetic body that happens with the jade egg practice too. But I came into the Yoni eggs. I saw a white woman who went viral because she was holding a surfboard from her vagina. And the woman was doing it.
That raises questions.
Yeah. And so what it was is, so with these vaginal eggs, some of them have a hole drilled in them, and you hang a string from them and you can attach stuff to it. So she was actually doing vaginal weightlifting, and her vaginal walls were so strong that she could hold an entire surfboard at the end of the string. And so I was like, well, maybe I need to strengthen my pelvic floor. Maybe I'm way off. So,
Krystal, that is quite a standard that you set for yourself.
You see, I wanted to go to the Olympics after.
Yeah, I was going to say, Doctor, Olympics, holding a surfboard with your vagina. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I had this kind of overachiever type of thing. Like it comes back to self-worth and wanting to be loved and stuff. I come from a broken home. But anyway.
I need to know the punchline to this story. Are you able to hold the surfboard from your vagina yet?
I never got to that point, unfortunately.
Okay.
No. But
that is Olympic training.
Also, logistically sounds difficult.
Yeah. I mean, women can literally crush, men's penises when their vagina gets that strong. So I don't think it's that important for me, but that caught my attention. And so I found somebody who sold these eggs, And I started to tell her about my dreams and everything. I kind of broke down because I was like, well, maybe this is a woman that can kind of know what I'm going through. And she was like, you should talk to my mentor. Maybe he can help you, you know? And so I contacted her mentor on social media, and he was the first person that was like, oh yeah, when you were going through this, this is what this probably meant. And when you had this dream, this is what this probably meant. And it resonated with me. And I was like, I don't know what you teach, but I need to learn it. And he ended up being a Tantra teacher. And that's how I got into Tantra.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, see, like Brian, like we talk about this sometimes too, like some of the work that we do is not necessarily through this like noble path. I had some like spiritual enlightenment, like I'm connected to all people. I want to be doing this to help humanity. It's kind of like, I wanted to become an Olympic runner. I wanted to tighten up my vagina. Like, yeah, I had these sex dreams. Now I'm teaching Tantra. Okay. So Krystal, thank you. That's an awesome story because we can all relate in our own regards. Now, I think like a really basic beginner question for us is, you know, we said Tantra or Tantra, what is it, right? Like which one is it? And then like, what are the basic tenets of Tantra? What are some of the misconceptions that the male population has about what Tantra is? And Brian, feel free to jump in with your own as we go on in this.
Oh, I will.
So you can say Tantra or Tantra. They both mean the same thing. You'll probably hear more people say Tantra, especially with the Indian pronunciation, lineage pronunciation. Most people will say Tantra, but you can say Tantra. The word breaks down in two Sanskrit meanings that I have researched and found. Tantra meaning expansion and liberation, as the most basic breakdown, and also tan meaning to weave. And so those are the basic definitions. As far as understanding what Tantra is, I would think that people need to look at it as like a spiritual science, as in like yoga or Taoism, if you've heard of Taoism. It's a science with a spiritual context. Just like you have physics, arithmetic, different sciences where we study, I don't know, just different subjects, different disciplines to understand how the world works. The difference with like Taoism and Tantra is that there's always a spiritual context, and it's always the point of studying these things is to become a whole and better human being, more kind and compassionate, more whole and connected with God, you know. And so whatever we do in our life, it's a natural path to figuring out what's the alchemic process of actually being able to do that. Because if your spirit doesn't have the tools to access the power to live a well life, then it's hard to do it. Like it's hard to break habits. It's hard to accomplish your goals if you don't have all the tools or understand how nature works, not just on the outside of you, but within you. And so Tantra is a science of learning how to do that. The difference between maybe Tantra and maybe like being Christian or any of your major religions is that it's a natural science, meaning that we want all aspects of self to be included, including your sexual energy, but it's just one aspect of who we are that we nurture and use in becoming our best selves. The biggest misconceptions, I would say, is just it's all about sex. I would say that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions, and that it's only for people who, I guess, are sex gods or like things like that. I guess those would be two of the biggest misconceptions.
As you describe this, I'm trying to understand, is it a belief structure or is it practice? Because when I was thinking of it, you're right. The misconception I had was A, this is about sex, and B, there's probably 4 exercises that you're going to teach me how to do. One is breath work, one is around masturbation, one is around visualization, and one is around something else that I don't know. Like that's kind of what I had in my head when I think of Tantra. It's like, what is it?
Right. Yeah. I would say that it's really trying to explain what physics is or what yoga is. You know, it really is a vast science, and there's practices in order to understand nature and understand like every spiritual science, every religion even at its core is designed to understand the divine. And the best way to understand the divine, God, whatever you want to call it, that entity that creates everything, that we really don't understand exactly what it is or isn't. The best way to do that is kind of to break down our own spirit, like understand what's going on in the earth and what's going on with us. What is our makeup? How did we get here? What is our purpose? Every spiritual teaching is designed to figure that out. Tantra is the same thing. The difference is it's more of a natural path. So we're not saying don't do this, don't do that. We're saying we need all aspects of self. We need everything that's going on in the world to figure out how do we get closer to God? Why are we here? And how do we make the most of our experience? And there's practices to do that. And yeah, I would say with Tantra, first of all, the practices expand, across, there's lots of different practices from what you eat to the way you touch yourself, masturbation, breath work, yoga. I mean, there's all types of practices. But the difference with Tantra is that you just want to make sure that you are not just trying to transcend different parts of yourself, but you want to bring all aspects of self so that you be a whole being. It is a lot about the experience, a lot about the intuitive path, because everything is not going to be right for everybody. Like what's extreme for one person might be extremely conservative for somebody else. So the idea is that the path is sort of intuitive, and you use your own life, the cards that you have been dealt, to figure out what works best for you. Not everything's going to work for everybody. And Tantra allows that kind of flexibility in the path and I wouldn't say necessarily belief system, but, it's like a science, because it's like, it is what is, you know what I'm saying? Like there's stuff that we believe, but then there's stuff that just is. And we know that because we test it and we've gone through it and we practiced it. So when we do breath work, we feel this way. Our body, our blood pressure goes down. This is what happens. So It's definitely more of a science. And then once the science is proven, of course, there's a belief there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to answer. Like, what's religion? Tell me what religion is. Tell me what meditation is. Tell me. It's probably more easily grasped by just, it's like bring it down a level here, like grasp by some of the benefits, some of the practices, and then like we can color and fill in the blanks. So, I think one of the questions that would be really helpful for us to know the answer to is like, what are some things that most men don't know about Tantra? That if they were to know it, they'd be beating down your door and saying, "Krystal, teach me." Right? Like, what are those things?
Well, first of all, when I started learning about Tantra, I like to talk about the chakra system and the energetic body, because even though I'm a very sensual being, very sexual being, I love, and I feel like most of us are, it's just suppressed. I'm always intrigued with the idea of like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What is God? And so I used to talk about that a lot. But what I have found is that a lot of times people are more interested in sex because it's such a suppressed part of who we are. Mm-hmm. And so for men, I would say, probably one of the things that they don't know, it's what grab their interest, is that they would learn that sex is a sacred act and that it's something that can be enjoyed to actually enhance their consciousness. And practices like semen retention can make your penis larger. So a lot of times when you are constantly ejaculating,
Krystal, let's go ahead and start with that. Dominic, I don't know how you edit the podcast, but go ahead and open with that line, and then we'll get to the spiritual stuff.
I know. I should have just started there. Men love their penises.
You do videos on penises.
I've got pictures of them.
Let's talk about that. Let's go into that. Okay, so what is semen retention, and how does that make your dick larger?
Yeah, okay. So semen retention is the practice of learning to separate your orgasm from your ejaculation. So orgasm and ejaculation, they're two separate things. And a lot of times when you ejaculate, you orgasm at the same time. But when you can learn to separate those through really Kegel exercises and learning awareness to kind of pull back, like coming to your edge and then still allowing the climax to happen, you can build that sexual experience. How it makes your penis bigger is you have a blood flow, right, that goes to your erectile tissue when you become hard. Okay. And if you're constantly ejaculating, you're losing all of that energy and blood flow. It's kind of like you're wearing yourself out. I remember I was talking to a guy, I don't have a penis, but I was talking to a guy and he was saying he felt like his penis was larger when he was younger versus now. And I was like, well, that makes sense, because if you're constantly masturbating and you do that over a period of time, or just having sex with a lot of different women, and you're not allowing the blood to actually stay in the penis long enough to nurture it, just like any other part of your body, it probably can shrink. Like your muscles, like they just kind of lose their plumpness and they lose their, their engorgement, Yeah. So that can happen to the penis. And I think what's great about a lot of Tantra practices, it reminds us we have to maintain our genitals, where it's your urogenital system or it's your actual reproductive organs. Like there's practices to actually help maintain them so that when you get like in your 40s and 50s, you can sustain your erection, and because you haven't worn yourself out and just depleted it. We even use terms like beat the meat. Like, you don't want to necessarily beat the meat. You want to cultivate it. You want to massage it. You want to look at it.
It's a really good point. We've never discussed the language of masturbation, but choke the monkey, beat the meat. These are all very...
Yeah, spank the monkey. Yeah.
Yeah. These are very aggressive.
These aren't very loving.
Moves.
Yeah, these aren't very loving terms for what we're. And I'm just thinking about like how many times I masturbated through like my teenage and 20s years, and I'm just like listening to what Krystal has to say. Like, I could be a giant if I just shown some freaking restraint. God only knows.
Respect it.
Right. Yeah. Or just been maybe a little bit more at your best. But I think just the body is very resilient. It's the smartest thing we have, like the knowledge of the body without the mind being in the way. Like, one of the most significant things that I learned, I think, with the practice of yoga is that nobody can heal your body like doctors, and the things that we take to nourish the body can help, but the body has its own intelligence and it can recover. Like, now if you've done too much damage, I guess there's only so far you can go, but who knows? I've heard of people who have gone through serious accidents, and through yoga, they've completely healed their body and gone on to do things that they weren't able to do before. So depending on your discipline and your intent, who knows, what you can do. But having a huge, huge penis is not the most important thing. I think what's most important for people is to be at their best, and also to be healthy, and also to be able to sustain their erection. And that's what semen retention allows you to do. You learn how to ejaculate when you want to, because I do think men should ejaculate sometimes, but it depends on your age and your lifestyle, and your personal preference and what works for you. And that takes body awareness, but you have to practice figuring out what that is.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because like one of the things I think I've talked about, Brian, on the show before is there was this period of time for about 11 months when I was in Sex Addicts Anonymous where I was completely abstinent, and I also didn't masturbate. So there's like 11 months where there was like nothing coming out of my body in that sense. I think I had a few wet dreams along the way. I felt like a teenager again during that period of time. And I didn't have the tantric practices the way that I do today, where I can circulate that energy throughout my body, that orgasmic energy. And we can talk about that in a few moments. But even without that, even without this practice, in those 11 months was when that sexual energy was not really, like, since it wasn't leaving my body, I had to put it somewhere, which was where I decided to leave a 15-year corporate career behind and to have the courage to put it into building my own business. Because like when I wasn't spewing out my life force into Kleenex or onto my chest and cleaning it up afterwards, like, and it was now stay in my body, I had to put it towards something else. And it was writing a book. It was, starting a blog, a video blog. And I didn't really recognize that that's where a lot of my life force came from, was holding that energy. But over the last few years, as I've gotten really, really precise around this, and I've become much more conscious around, as a man who's in his 40s, the amount of times I choose to ejaculate, it has to be conscious. I've recognized how it affects my workouts. I recognize how magnetic or like my personality is or not. I can see a sparkle in my eye or not based on how much I've ejaculated that week. And Brian has heard a lot about this from like our men's group meetings where I go deep into like, times where I've really been sidetracked by it. But this stuff that you're talking about is super pertinent to me. So I would say maybe if you're talking to a group of men who maybe are like in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like what are some of the considerations around ejaculation frequency? And then also, if a guy is masturbating, what kind of practice can he bring of intentionality around circulating his energy and being able to, to stay with that feeling longer versus just always ejaculating?
Yeah, I think it's an individual thing, but I think that the first thing that I want to say to guys of any age is know that your semen, your penis, in Sanskrit we call it lingam, is an aspect of pure consciousness. It's divine, it's godly. And so to see it that way. And I know for some guys, there's a lot of ego there, but also to see it as something divine, something that if you know how to use it correctly should be worshiped by whoever your partner is. And to see it, and see it as something that is not to just be given, but also to be used for yourself. It's one of the ways that we're able to have children, but it's also how you nurture your own body and how you lose a lot of hormones, testosterone and minerals and vitamins whenever you release that. And when you're young, and you're super virile and everything, it's okay. You can get away with it for a little while. But as you become older and you're not making as much testosterone, and depending on, your lifestyle and what you're doing, it becomes more important to reserve that for yourself, and also having mental clarity and having discipline. And because what's going to be sexiest for a woman is not necessarily somebody with a giant dick, but it's going to be somebody who is patient, that's very insightful, that is very confident, mentally and emotionally tuned in as well. So like you're talking about that magnetic energy, like that holistic view of you as a man is what's going to draw not just a lover into your life that you want, but also the type of life you want to create. There's a lot of pressure on men to be extremely masculine in like money and clothes and cars and physically how they perform in the bedroom, when what's actually going to make you feel more fulfilled as a person and even in your relationships, if you understand the awareness that comes with your sexual energy that's not just physical, your creativity, your insightfulness, your intuition, and not being able to control your sexual energy is a big part of not being able to tap into that, or even just having a lot of pressure on the physical aspect of your dick. Like that will take a lot away from your own sexual experience as well, and just feeling like a man, and if it's always so dependent on the physical practice. So the first thing I would say you need to do is learn to manage your ejaculation. And I know for some people, that's going to be huge in itself, especially if you're watching a lot of porn. You may have to start there, instead of watching porn, 5 times a day, maybe you start with once a day, and you start finding other activities to fill your time with. And you maybe only ejaculate once a day.
To that point, like one of the things that you did on one of your videos that was really insightful was porn is like fast food. And Brian and I have talked a lot about porn on the show, and we're not anti-porn. We just think that there's a lot of unconscious behavior when it comes to porn. And one of the things that you said in that video that Brian and I hadn't heard before was porn is often about satiating that carnal hunger in the moment, but it doesn't necessarily address your emotional hunger, your psychological hunger. And that's why, and I think that delineation that you made, that distinction you made around my emotional body, my spiritual body, right? The psychological well-being often goes unaddressed. So we find ourselves physically drawn to porn because it can alleviate a craving in the moment. And then we ejaculate in the moment. But then oftentimes there is that guilt or shame that comes afterwards. Like, why did I just do that? Why did I just watch that? Like, I don't feel better as a result. Maybe I feel a little bit less stressed, but there's like a lingering feeling, not unlike a lingering feeling that you may have if you just had a supersized Big Mac value meal, where it feels good while you're doing it, but then whatever you're driving around with feeling afterwards. Like, we all know that experience. So just you even putting the emphasis on Tantra speaks to your emotional body, your spiritual body, your psychological body, at the same time as your physical. And I just wanted to bring that into the conversation here because you did a superb job bringing that awareness to us.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I realized, like with my ex-husband, because we had some incompatibilities in the bedroom, and for some reason we were having a hard time connecting. And he's a great guy, but we were having issues there, and I'm extremely emotional. And what I realized is, in trying to talk to him, is that he didn't feel like his feelings mattered. And I thought that was so huge. I was like, oh, well, it's hard for you to care about my feelings because you feel like that your feelings don't matter. So it's hard for you to practice connecting with what I have going on with me emotionally. And really the best way to help a woman orgasm is to make sure she's in the emotional and mental state to be ready for that. And then her body kind of follows. But a lot of guys, I think, feel like their emotions don't matter. What they're feeling doesn't matter. It's just like, I'm bringing money in, I'm doing this or that. Maybe I'm cheating, maybe I'm not. But whatever they feel like morally or integrity-wise they have to do to survive, to make it. But there's not a lot of emphasis, especially for men, put on the fact that, sometimes things are hard for them emotionally. They're going through things too, and the way they express it might look different. The way they handle it might be different, but there's not a lot of emphasis on the self-care aspect of that for guys. And that can affect your sex life as well, and affect your quality of life. Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, when I think about sex, especially growing up, going back to college and even after that, like the two words that come to mind are get it and performance. That was the 1-2 punch. Like, do everything I can to get it and then perform. And there's no room there for anything but the release. There's no room for anything but that carnalness that you're talking about. The idea of feeling, right? That was not emotion, connection. That wasn't something I even equated with sex. And so when you're talking about these tantric practices and how to connect and consciousness, I mean, I'm still very early in understanding what that is in my sexual journey. But I try to stay away from onomatopoeias here on the podcast because they don't come across that well. But it's just like, wow, like this is a whole different ball game. And what I didn't realize that the separation between orgasm and ejaculation, I didn't realize that was a tantric practice. I thought that was just a tool that we learned.
Oh, no. Yeah. Again, like Tantra is right, like the natural science. So like you may have come across it. Some people come across things like this just through exploring their bodies. If they don't have so much shame around them, they discover this stuff through practice because it's like, okay, at some point a guy has to train himself to last long or they're going to have issues with the female because usually female takes a lot longer to orgasm. And so if you don't figure that out, if someone didn't teach you or you didn't figure that out on your own, like you could have a hard time. And I don't care how big your penis is. It's like you have to train yourself to at least be able to sustain the erection through some type of practice. And every man, I guess, has to go through that in order to be successful in the bedroom. It's really important. And this is why I kind of, I like talking about tantric concepts, but usually we have to kind of come just down to the basic stuff, right? Because it's like, well, how is this practical? And before we even get into a whole bunch of terminology and practices, just the emotional aspect of sex and what does that mean? And I'm so glad that you brought that up because when you're watching porn, it really leaves out emotional connection. So that's something else that guys can do when they're trying to get into these first semen retention practices before you even get into any kind of serious yoga practices related to Tantra. If you're going to watch porn or any kind of sensual stuff, try to find something with some emotional connection or storyline or something that your girl might want to watch or a partner that may be more feminine want to watch with you. Try to find stuff where there's actually a storyline and a connection outside of just like zoom into the asshole and there goes the dick. And
Oh, you've seen that one. Krystal, I have a question. So growing up, I played baseball. I had baseball coaches. I've had personal development coaches, like life coaches. I get that, and I understand the importance of it. It seems to me that I have a resistance to bringing a coach in when it comes to sex and sexuality. It even seems like with my partner, like, I mean, is that okay? It seems like a barrier that I'm not totally sure how to cross. I'm curious how you work with guys or couples with that.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned, and it took me a while, like into my 30s, really just recently, I'm coming into these teachings. Like I'm not somebody who's got 20 years of experience in this stuff. I've had like a journey that's been very tantric before I knew the terminology. But when it comes to actual sex, to really understand, well, what's going on and why were me and my husband having these incompatibility issues and all this stuff. Like it took me getting into like my 30s before I figured this out because you have to be taught. There's no education around sex as far as pleasure is concerned for the most part. It's like, don't get pregnant before you get married. Don't have sex until you get married. Sex is STDs. Like those are the type of conversations and education most of the time we're exposed to. But sex is kind of a broad topic, right? Just scientifically. And then you add the aspect of pleasure and people's needs, desires, wants, their fantasies, and all of this stuff. The mechanics are not necessarily that big of an issue because if you use your intuition and you're able to communicate, then it's not a big problem. But we have so much suppression and shame around it. Just having a conversation can be hard. So you need to bring in someone who at least has the energy to kind of let you know it's okay, and then have the conversations. I don't think it has to take a whole lot, but there's so much to unlearn when it comes to sex. And people need safe spaces, I think, just to unpack. I don't think it has to take a whole lot, but you do need good, well-rounded education, and you do need a safe space to be held to do that. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard, especially if you bring in a partner, because you've got their issues surrounding with sex and what they've learned, and then you've got your own, and it's a lot. And in ancient times, they actually did have schools where they taught this as any other discipline because it was a serious issue. And I think people just need to prioritize it, because if you think about it, if your relationship or if you're having issues around sexuality, it's going to cause so many other issues, whether it be when it comes to having children, or if you've got any shame around it, and then it affects other areas of your life, your health, the health of your genitals. Whenever that starts to go down, everything else starts to go down. You know what I'm saying? It really affects every aspect of your life. So it's really the foundation of, I think, having a very kind of whole and happy life. And I think we know that, but there's so much shame around wanting to talk about it. It's like somehow we're just supposed to know everything, even though we've had extremely poor education about it. Like, it's just, we need to unlearn that.
Do you suggest that people come to you individually first or come to you in partnership first? Where do you start with people?
Mostly I've worked with people one-on-one first. I haven't worked with a lot of couples yet, but I don't know, everybody's path is different, like it depends. But if say if it's a lover, because it's hard, if there's somebody you really love or care about, you may not want to unpack all this stuff in front of them initially until you get comfortable with your body and comfortable with everything. And then you can come to them with a different confidence instead of being extremely defensive if certain things come up. So I would say individually, but that also might mean just like being a part of a group where it's safe and y'all can just talk and interact. Because I think the interactions and hearing other people's stories, knowing that you're not alone and like you're not the only person that's dealing with similar challenges, can be helpful too. So
is it sexual? Like if you go into a class and you teach someone, like whether it's one-on-one with a guy or in a group, or are people naked? Do they have the clothes? Like what? Like I don't know. Like when I think about a tantric teacher, I'm like, what underwear should I wear? I'm not sure if it's going to be.
And people should know that there's all different types of workshops under Tantra. And that's why some people even try to get away from the word Tantra, because it's been so kind of diluted to mean so many different things. And depending on where you go, what you do, it could be a clothing optional class. And then you do have workshops where people are just having sex and stuff. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. For me personally, I'm not hosting any of the like non-closed things right now. But usually when I start with people, it's more like a conversation. It's like, well, let's just decide, what is it that you want to work on? And my big thing is always like, how does this integrate into the rest of your life? What is it that you really want? Because sex is one aspect, but usually it has a domino effect into other areas. And we have to figure out how you get to where you are. And what do you want your life to be like moving forward? And then the first basic practice for men and women is like vaginal breathing. And then for men is semen retention. Like those are the basics. So, understanding that and how that can enhance your life mentally, emotionally, physically is probably where I start most of the time, and depending on where people are, it might have to just stop with, okay, we need to work on your porn, how much you work on that, and then we'll get into, well, what is semen retention? Why is this important? And then I have like guided meditations to, help practice with semen retention, which is usually over the phone and me talking to you. And that's where like with men, it can get a little like, okay, who's really serious and who's not?
Oh, right. Because like they're self-stimulating. Like you're doing a guided meditation. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. There's some gray zone there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I don't mind the pleasurable aspect of it as long as people are serious. And that's why like with men, I'm like maybe doing some kind of group class first and just talking to it. Like, I don't know if y'all seen some of my videos where I'll take out, my friends. I call them my friends or my dildos or whatever, and talk to them and stuff like that. Doing more things like that in a group session and demonstrating like that. I like doing stuff like that. So with men, group classes, but if it's a one-on-one, what I would like to do with people who are ready for that is do a guided meditation so they can learn the semen retention tantric practices that I've learned, and I guide them through it, because it's nice when you can have somebody talking to you, tell you what to do, because then you have that enhancement of sexual energy that you can play with, that arousal, and then you don't have to think about the mechanics of it that much until you get it on your own.
All right, Krystal, this is awesome. So now we have listeners who are like, okay, I want to give this thing a try. And you've talked a lot about semen retention being like the first foundational practice. Now, if a guy wants to go away and not necessarily commit to 30 days of semen retention, but he just wants to masturbate differently this next time, what is the template or the guidance that you'd give him to say, go try this differently?
Okay. I really feel like it's very individual, but the first thing that you need to do is like just manage how many times a day you're ejaculating. Because I know some men are like ejaculating several times a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you just need to make a goal to not ejaculate as many times a day. So if you're ejaculating 5 times a day, maybe try to take it down to 3 or 2. As far as your masturbation is concerned, in the way that you can fill your day with other things, whether it be exercise or, you know, maybe if you're feeling like that you're tempted to masturbate, maybe you do 100 push-ups or 25, I don't know, wherever your fitness is, like go do some type of physical activity that takes that energy away, something that's more productive for your life. So you need to start off with just managing how many times a day you masturbate and ejaculate. If you're pretty much okay with that, you know, semen retention is a lot like edging. Some people understand that terminology better. So you can just start with, say you, whatever you do to excite you, you know, you stroke yourself or you massage yourself until you come to your edge and then you stop. This can be very tough, you know, depending on it's, and you should know that it's going to take a lot of discipline and it can make you extremely horny, but you work your way to be able to grow some mental strength and discipline, you know, at your own pace. There's no pressure, you know, this is you just trying to do something for yourself and have this experience. So you work yourself to your edge and then you stop. And so you maybe do that a few times when you would normally ejaculate and see how that goes. Maybe try that for a week. So, you know, limiting the amount of times you ejaculate maybe to 25 and 50%, and then try the edging thing when you normally would ejaculate and then see how that goes.
Would there be another component to that, like around, like when you get to the edge, before letting yourself tip over, is there some breathing that you can do to kind of circulate that energy to allow? Because I know that was like a big game changer for me.
Right. Yeah. So that then you're getting more into the tantric practices. So there's this thing called microcosmic orbit. And so what you can do is, first of all, deep belly breathing really helps relax. So when you're trying to come down from that really heightened arousal state, you can take some deep inhales through your nose and bring the air really down into your loins or your gut where it expands, and then exhale slowly. And you can do that several times until you can bring the energy down. There's a Taoism practice called Microcosmic Orbit, where once you have kind of settled yourself and you're ready to take this energy that's still going to be somewhat there, and you can circulate it by imagining this energy coming from your tailbone and traveling all the way up to the top of the crown of your head, and then passing down the front of the body. So from your third eye or the middle in between your brows, and then all the way down your face, and then down to your solar plexus or your belly, and storing that energy there. And just kind of imagine all that aroused energy that you created, that you're storing it for yourself in your powerhouse. Your core is your powerhouse. And you can do that several times, as many times as you need to, until you feel like, okay, I think I can be okay.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, the idea of breathing during masturbation or sex, that wouldn't have even crossed my mind before. So I think the fact that semen retention is not coming and then retaining the semen like next to your bed somewhere, that's probably what I would have thought to begin with. And then 2, just breathing, that's a game changer there.
Yeah, I mean, but how, you know, again, I'm not a man. It's kind of hard. I'm glad I'm talking to you guys because I always get more information. But when you are with a girl that's got really good pussy, like, how do you calm yourself down, you know, to make sure that you sustain? You have to relax, that you have to breathe. You know, it's very kind of practical in that way, too. You know, it's like, okay, you know what I'm saying?
So yes, but even that's an advanced practice, because to answer your question directly, I probably would have drank more alcohol. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous, so I need to numb it down, right? Like that's what we did most of our life. So it was the not being able to hang with it. Right. And that's what you're giving us, is this gift of here's how to hang with it.
Right. Yeah. Like it's the programming, right? I was watching this Indian girl and this Kenyan girl who they're like sex educators in their countries. And they were talking about that when they orgasm, they automatically have this American accent. And it's because of all the porn. I like your face. But it's because of all the porn, that American porn that they have watched, you know, and how it's programmed them to figure out like how sex should be, what should be pleasurable, just, whatever we feel about sex, like we can program ourselves to what we're supposed to get aroused by, or how we're supposed to react, or how we're supposed to get ready for sex, drinking alcohol. That's why we really have to watch how much porn, we consume and what it's actually doing to us. The semen retention practices and stuff like that will help you have clarity in how to connect with your lover. So, working with yourself first. But I think it's important to, if you have somebody that you are having sex with regularly, to let them know that you're interested in trying to do semen retention or change your habits. And maybe they can be a part of the process of like being patient or supporting you in that journey. And so that's how you can initially incorporate your partner into your newfound kind of tantric beginnings.
Awesome. Krystal, thank you. And if there is someone who's listening, or someone's who are listening right now that are like, yep, I want to work with Krystal, help me learn all this, they get me on the path of doing tantric work as a practice, are there ways that they can work with you right now?
Not really. Like, I'm working on my website right now. Definitely within the next couple of months, my website will be done. I should be moved, hopefully in New York, and settled. And so that's really when I want to begin to offer services to people. But if you follow me on Instagram, it's Krystal, Krystal _Tantric Yogi. I'll announce everything on there. You can also follow me on YouTube. And I promise that I'll have all of that very soon. And you can contact me on there. You can also contact me by email, krystaltantricyogi@yahoo.com. And I'll have a lot of stuff coming very soon. I'm still in the structuring process of my business. I
will be reaching out to you on Instagram for a placeholder for when you get to Brooklyn and say, great, we're ready to work together when you are. We'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad I know someone. What part of Brooklyn are you staying?
Oh, we're in Williamsburg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm in Union Square, which is just like a stopover from Williamsburg. So, we'll be seeing you when you move up here. And I'm going to link all your Instagram, your YouTube, and your email in the show notes. So if anyone wants to reach out, make it really easy. Krystal, thank you. I believe this is probably going to be our first of a number of conversations that we have on the show with you, because so many of your Instagram videos, YouTube videos have topic titles that like our guys are definitely going to want to dive deeper into. So thank you for coming here and starting the conversation with us.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I love talking about sex with guys when they're smart.
Krystal, one more.
You did a great job fooling you, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to test that real quick here. You've been doing this for a while. You're an expert. Now, Dominic mentioned this twinkle in his eye when he does semen retention. Can you see it right now? Like, does he have?
When was the last time I masturbated? Look at my eye and tell me.
Can you get it down to the day or the hour?
Maybe. It's hard. My camera is not that clear. I'm going to say last week.
Last week. Dominic.
Wow. You got that right. Like
expert.
Yeah, you got that right. Like, it's been a week.
You're lying.
I swear to God. No, I swear to God. Like, it's been a week. So you actually nailed that. That's
All right.
Really?
Well, I'm gonna close my eyes now.
I didn't use my eyes. I used your personality, like the energy that I get from you. I get that you are disciplined, but I get that you're still very sexual. Like, you enjoy sex, you enjoy masturbating, but you have discipline with it. And so I'm like, it couldn't have been too long, because there's still some exciting energy that I feel for you, because I can't really see your eyes.
All right. Brian, I appreciate that question, man, because I just got... I think my day is done. I'm feeling lit up over here.
Yeah, it sounds like he's not going to go that much longer, actually.
Hey, did you get something of value out of this podcast? If so, I'm going to ask you a favor. Would you be so amazing as to go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review? Your ratings and reviews can show someone who's just discovered our podcast for the first time that we are worth listening to. And that way we can reach a wider audience. So please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. You rock.